Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to be working on epoxy in my garage floor, and I'm going to be turning it from this to this. So stick around and I'll show you guys how I do that. So first things first, need to get everything out of here so I actually can get to the floor, and this is a pretty big task. There's a lot of stuff in my shop, including this wood rack, which saves a ton of space. I built this on the channel quite a few years ago. You can go check that out. I'll leave the link right on the screen right now. It'll pop up so you guys can go check that out. Now that I have the room cleaned out, I can now start prepping the concrete for the epoxy. Now this space is about the size of a 2-car garage. It's pretty decent. The ceilings are a little bit lower than a normal garage, but it works well for a shop. I'm going to start first by sweeping the area, and if I see any glue or paint that's stuck to the floor, I'm going to use a flat edge, this flat shovel, and scrape that up. You don't want to have anything on that concrete, or else the epoxy won't be able to really bond to that concrete like it's supposed to. Once everything's swept and all the dust is out of here, I'm going to go through and wet down the entire slab. I'm going to brush the water around a little bit, making sure there's no standing water, but everything has thoroughly been covered with water and is wet. Then I'm going to take this quick prep solution. This does 3 steps in one. It cleans, degreases the concrete, and also etches it so that the epoxy has a good surface to bond to. I started off with the sprayer, but it didn't go quite fast enough, and so I just decided to pour this evenly throughout the slab, and then I'm going to go through with the broom, making sure that I scrub this in really good to the surface, and then after that's all done, you're going to need to rinse this off several times. While I was brushing this, I could already see a lot of the dirt coming out of the concrete, whether that's the oil, degrease, or etching. It was working pretty well, so I'm going to keep scrubbing this in, let it sit for a little while, and then come back with my pressure washer. And I'm trying to pressure wash this out as much as I can, keep the water out of the basement, so I'm blowing it towards the door, trying to get it out of the space so there's no standing water. I would definitely recommend using a pressure washer, especially if your concrete slab is as dirty as mine was. This is really old. The house was built in '66. There's a lot of stains that just will not come out, whether it's the red clay staining it over the years or rust marks where metal was set on top of the concrete and it rusted. So I'm not going to be able to get all of that up. You mainly just want to get all the dirt, the oil, and grease off of the surface so it's a nice solid coat on the surface of concrete so that the epoxy can really bond with it like it's supposed to. Greenworks definitely did not sponsor this video, but I believe they probably should have, because I've used this pressure washer in quite a few videos and it works really well. I actually have a video review of this pressure washer. You guys can go check that out if you're interested, but this thing has been really handy and I've used it a ton. If you don't have a shop vac, you can easily just let this sit for quite a while, leave the door open and let it dry. I'm going to go through and just vacuum up the water real quick with my shop vac, and I'm going to leave this overnight, come back the next day, and I'll be able to start epoxying this. Alright, so I left the floor dry overnight. Looks like it's pretty much dry now. I'm going to get started on doing the epoxy soon. What's left is mostly just red clay stained and rust stains where metal was on the floor when it got wet. Can't really get that out, it just stained the concrete. So I'm going to get ready to start epoxying the floor. So today I'm going to be using this garage floor epoxy that Craftsman makes. This has the whole kit, so there's a 2-part mixture, plus it has a bag of flakes that you sprinkle over top to add a nice texture when it's done. They also make a clear coat that you put over top to seal that. I'm not going to be using that today because that will add an additional couple days onto the dry time because you have to wait in between coats before reapplying. So that might be something you want to look into. But another thing to consider, each one of these epoxies are different. So I would recommend just making sure you check those recommendations from the manufacturer to tell you how long to wait before you can park on it, exactly how much square footage this stuff will cover, so that you have everything ready before you start. Now this stuff doesn't smell the greatest, so I'm going to be using a respirator. I'm going to have the garage door wide open so that fresh air can get in. Another thing you're definitely going to need is some spike shoes. Apparently our Lowe's and Home Depot, even though they sell the epoxy, everything else you need for the job, they don't stock these spike shoes, so I'm going to make a pair real quick. It's pretty simple. I'm going to post my next video on how to make these, so if you guys are interested, I'll leave the link right on the screen here, as well as at the end of this video. You can go check it out. But it took me about maybe 20 minutes to make these. Then I'm ready to go. I've got my spike shoes. I can walk on that epoxy without leaving any footprints, and it's pretty easy. Now to mix this, I'm going to be using my drill with a paint spinner on the end, and then a 5-gallon bucket. For each of these 1 gallon of epoxy, that will be plenty of space. And they're in 2 parts, so as soon as you start mixing this, it's going to start working on hardening. So you have a set amount of time before this will not be workable anymore, so you kind of want to go fast with this. But one thing I wasn't aware of when I purchased this is there's an expiration date on these epoxies. I guess there's not a very long shelf life for this particular one. I don't know about others. But after I finished pouring this bucket in, I realized it was still really heavy, and there's about an inch of epoxy down at the bottom that has hardened. And I looked at the expiration date, and I was only like 2 months away from the sell by date. But I would definitely recommend checking out that sell by date, making sure that it's well within the range that it's supposed to be, so that you don't end up losing out on some of that epoxy. I was already going to get pretty close to not having enough for this floor. It was going to be just enough, and having a little bit of that bucket not actually contributing to the epoxy, I was a little worried. It ended up working out just fine, but technically things that are getting that close to expiration date probably should be discounted a little bit. To make this easy, I'm just going to be pouring the epoxy directly onto the slab and making a thin trail evenly throughout the space. And then I'm going to come back with the roller and spread that out. And it worked really well for me. You may want to do it differently, but that's what I'd recommend. I found it helpful that once you had everything covered, I took the roller and ran across the entire width of the slab all the way down, and that helps smooth everything out, make sure that there's no thick spots anywhere, and completely cover everything evenly. Then once I'm done rolling everything, I'm going to come back with a brush real quick and just cut in around some of these poles and edges that the roller couldn't reach. Now I'm going to start spreading the flakes on here, and what you don't want to do is walk around sprinkling directly down to the floor. You want to throw this up in the air and throw it away from you as far as you can, and that will help spread those flakes out, and it will evenly spread them out over the floor. And then once you're done, if there's any thin spots, you can come back and sprinkle them lightly directly over where you want to apply them. But I found it helpful to just step back quite a ways and throw it and let it spread out on its own. Alright, that just about finishes up the video for today. Hope you guys enjoyed this one and found it helpful. If you did, let me know down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you guys. Now, I have to wait a couple days before this epoxy floor is finished before I can start moving everything in. It turned out great, absolutely love it. Now, before I move everything back in the shop, I have a few things I need to do. I'm going to be sealing that basement wall so that moisture doesn't come in. There's a few spots that very clearly moisture's coming in. So I'll show you guys in one of my upcoming videos, so stay tuned for that. but this is going to turn out great and I absolutely love it. Here's the transformation, what it's going to look like when it's all done and everything's moved back in. So thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to hit that like button down below and subscribe if you have not already, and I'll see you guys in the next one.